Conversation, so this is better to make sure that everyone is alive, not napping. And please, if you're napping, just make sure that you make no noise. That would be better for every one of us. Okay, so thank you for being us for this thematic session on mobilizing domestic capital and decreasing FOREX risks for decentralized renewable energy projects and companies. As you may have experienced already in your own projects and initiatives, the lack of domestic capital combined with high foreign exchange risks prevent the energy sector to thrive, and for DRE companies and projects to present low risk, bankable and sustainable projects and models. So as we are all looking for brilliant ideas and great actions to overcome this situation and unlock the potential for the sector, we will be exploring strategies, innovative ideas, lessons learned, challenges and opportunities, as well as concrete experiences on how to facilitate domestic investments to support scaling up energy access solutions exponentially in local markets. So this is a very technical topic, but I promise we will do our best to keep it concrete, exciting, and fun as much as possible. And let me tell you that our expert panelists are very excited about it. I couldn't even keep them still while preparing this session, so this is a very promising event. So please let me first introduce you the experts from the public and private sectors that we are welcoming today, and I hope that this conversation will be the occasion for you all to learn, brainstorm, and draw the path for a great future for the sector. So I'll start with actually Chris Verdeman, yes, Managing Director of Impact Finance Services at Mirovas and Founder, which supports since 2012 clean energy companies in the distributed energy space through debt capital and innovative instruments. Chris started her career as a lawyer, but developed into an impact investment specialist. And she now heads up the advisory arm of Mirovas and Founder, supporting clean energy companies with attracting the financing they need to grow. Then we have Monajit Pal, Division Manager at the Energy Efficiency and Clean Cooking Division at the African Development Bank, which develops financing instruments and guarantees for supporting DRE projects and companies. Monajit has worked in the energy sector for a decade with a focus on innovative climate finance operations, special initiatives and developing new business lines. Prior to that, Monajit worked in the AFDB's private sector operations department on a variety of investment operation and initiatives. Then we have Marie Testar, Head of Funding at NG Energy Access, which provides pay-as-you-go solar home systems and operates mini-grid in 9 countries. Marie has been working in the mini-grid industry for 6 years and in the energy market for more than 10 years. Previously, she was credit risk manager for the European activities for NG, and before that, she used to work in the equity markets. And finally, we have Folabi Akirogunde. Am I pronouncing it correctly? Thank you.
It'll do.
Investment manager at Olan, which is an impact investment company focusing on energy access in Nigeria, providing financing solutions to companies operating in the sector, currently having 50 investors in their portfolio. Folabi is a commercial professional with almost 20 years of renewables, gas, power, and investment experience. His experience has included brand and marketing management in the telecom sector before moving to oil and gas about 19 years ago. At Shell, he worked in business development, and he's worked in business planning, oil and gas economics, and spent the last 4 years in the renewable space with Olan. So please, thank you for a round of applause to our experts panelists. Thank you. Okay, so with no further ado, let me jump right into the subject. And I would like to start with you, Chris. Mirovas and Founder has significant experience in raising debt capital in the DRE markets. What is your experience in raising domestic capital and mitigating FOREX risks? And what is, in your opinion, the successful ways, instruments, or mechanisms to achieve a safer and more attractive market?
Thank you, Camille. That's a long question to answer. Maybe for people that don't know Mirovas and Founder, we do, on the one hand, we provide debt to renewable energy, distributed renewable energy companies. And on the other hand, we help advise companies that want to grow and need financing for that. I think whenever we get a financing case on our desk, we look at it, and one of the problems or one of the obstacles or challenges that need to be solved is always the local currency. Because for us, there is an obvious risk. If you provide a hard currency loan, but a company earns its revenue in local currency, there's an obvious risk that if something happens to the valuation of the local currency, if it goes down, there might not be enough to repay. So that's always an issue that we consider, and as early as possible try to find a solution. I think there's multiple solutions that have been tried and tested in the market. TCX plays an important role there, MCX plays a role there, other hedging solutions can be looked after. That's one solution. It sometimes might not work from a cost perspective because those solutions are expensive. Then there is kind of what we call a natural mitigant. So if there is a way in which the company can raise their revenue or change their prices in line with the valuation, then you have the revenue goes up in line with what they need to repay on their debts. Also not maybe ideal because in the end then the customer are victimized by that, which is not what we're aiming for. And then there is those two are kind of our regular kind of solutions that we look at, and then there is the one big kind of challenge which we would like to kind of evolve, but it isn't there yet, and that's more the partnership with the local banks to see. I know it's happened before in other sectors as well, but we would like to work more and more with local banks to see if we can give them a guarantee. They can then disburse in local currency. We can take the credit risk, or other finance partners that we work with, they can take the credit risk, and then the FOREX risk would sit with local banks that have access to local currency, and to them that risk is more manageable than for us. And then there is also great other programs that we see popping up, like EAIF. That's someone else will talk about more, but those programs are something that we follow very carefully because, the more kind of guaranteed or partners we have to work together with, I think the easier it is to find a good solution that fits to that specific investment case. That's it.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe just a very quick question following what you just said regarding investigating partnerships with local banks. Are you investigating that, and what is the feedback so far from the local banks?
They're interested. So especially if they don't have to take credit risk, for them it's a great way of testing out a market, looking into it, seeing if maybe in the future they do want to take a credit risk. They can get to know the clients. The issue is often the pricing, because we want to be compensated for the credit risk we take, and we need to find a pricing that is kind of reasonable for the client as well, and that is where discussions often stop. But I do think the willingness is there, and we are on a number of investment skates quite far in the negotiations, so those might work out. Also, the legal structure is a bit more complicated because you need to have guarantees in place instead of a straightforward loan agreement.
Thank you. I don't know if there is any local banks representative or even TCX, as you mentioned it also in your intervention, in the audience, but that would be interesting if there are some to engage in the discussion after the questions. Moving on to Monojit, what role can the AFDB play in mobilizing domestic capital and reducing FOREX risk? And what initiative or financing mechanisms have been successful in supporting domestic investment in the sector so far, and what did you learn?
Thank you very much. So local currency is something that the bank has looked at for a while, because the applicability, the issues that Chris, you mentioned sort of are much wider than the DRE space. So I think, going back, and we looked at it through a mix of support for initiatives, programs, and also specific transactions. So if you go back about a decade and a half ago, the bank, along with other DFIs, notably led by FMO, set up TCX, which is now active in this space and sort of running various initiatives, even focused on renewables, not necessarily focused on DRE though. Looking back, sorry. Okay. But the issue of financing from local banks that you raised is absolutely critical, and I think that's again a wider issue that's sort of common to SMEs who also operate in Africa, and this was a problem that we looked at as well. And along with Denmark and Spain, about a decade ago, set up the African Guarantee Fund, which provides guarantees to banks to make them more comfortable with taking the risk of lending to smaller scale enterprises. So this is another example of how we've sort of come in at a program level to sort of facilitate local currency financing for SMEs. And the same applies in the case of sort of specific markets. So if you take Nigeria, for instance, InfraCredit, we were not involved in setting it up directly, but we have backed InfraCredit, which looks to provide support to bond issuances, sort of tapping the local sort of institutional investor market, which is significant in Nigeria, to try and see how they can bring projects forward that might sort of be included in portfolios of institutional investors. So we've worked with InfraCredit in the past, and InfraCredit is also sort of increasingly looking at sort of a green portfolio as they grow. Coming into sort of country level solutions, I think coming here in Cote d'Ivoire about 5 years ago, we worked with Crédit Agricole and Société Générale over here to put in place a partial risk guarantee, partial credit guarantee for a receivables-backed financing structure for solar home systems in Cote d'Ivoire. So basically, Société Générale provided the financing. The risk was shared between the bank, Société Générale, and the FDB. So partial guarantee. So everyone was exposed, but we took out some of the exposure, and that's facilitated the rollout of solar home systems in Cote d'Ivoire to some extent. And from that experience, we felt there was a need to replicate and sort of widen that structure. And with that view in mind, over the last 2 to 3 years, we worked very closely with the Green Climate Fund to put in place a program called LEAF, which Chris mentioned just now. It's a leveraging energy access framework. And that, what it does is focuses on 6 countries in West Africa. It focuses on Guinea, Ghana, and Nigeria. In East Africa, it's Kenya and Ethiopia, and in North Africa, Tunisia. And it covers essentially the market solar home systems, mini-grids, and CNI. And of course, the focus in each of these countries will vary. So for instance, in Tunisia, that the market is much more CNI than energy access. And we're sort of now looking at the early transactions opportunities in this through LEAF. One conversation that we're having is, for instance, with the African Guarantee Fund, where we are looking to see how we can leverage their network to sort of extend the work that they're doing already and sort of provide more. They have a green portfolio, and how we could sort of extend that with a focus on DRE. So that's a conversation that's happening as we speak. Speaking of Nigeria, we're also sort of providing technical assistance. There is the ARM Harith team, which is a fund manager based out of Nigeria, is actually raising a fund that will focus on distributed renewable sort of sub 1 megawatt in Nigeria, and so we're providing technical assistance as they sort of prepare to scale up the fund and raise more financing for it. And just speaking of technical assistance and sort of talking about banks, which Chris mentioned, I think one other part of the LEAF program is providing assistance to banks to try and understand this space, so that they understand the risks, and sort of that takes away hopefully some of the resistance in in looking at such projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monajit. Just want to come back very quickly on the risk sharing that you mentioned. This seems to be quite interesting. Is there any specific lessons that you learned as far as what is interesting to be doing, or what shouldn't be done, like the do's and the don'ts, maybe from this very specific experience?
So, I mean, I think on risk sharing, our perspective thus far is generally that I think wherever we get an arrangement, the risk should be shared. I think we are not looking to ever take out risk from the, sorry, we're not looking to take out the entire credit risk. We believe that there should be sharing. So for instance, if you look at the case that we have in Côte d'Ivoire, the risk was shared 1/3 by all of the, by each of the 3 banks that were participating, SocGen, Crédit Agricole, and the FDB. The structure that we're putting in place, or we're discussing with the African Guarantee Fund, which is in line with their sort of standard and traditional model, is that they will sort of cover the FI's exposure up to a certain point. We might sort of help AGF sort of go beyond their regular business and focus on DRE by covering part of that exposure. So all of us are equally exposed. And we're drawing on, so we're pulling in funds from outside, from concessional sources, Green Climate Fund, and so the bank and the GCF will share part of that counter guarantee exposure. So I mean, one thing that I think we believe is everyone should share. I think it may not work so well to take out exposure completely for anyone.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting comment. I have another question that is related to what you said, but I think that the 4 of you may have a comment to do on it, so I'll just have it for later. I'd like to turn to Murray now. As a representative of a developer, what is your opinion on the best strategy and the barriers to reduce FOREX, and what is your return on experience in local markets?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, being a mini-grid and SHS developer, I wanted to maybe dig into more concrete example of what could be solutions that we use in order to decrease our FOREX exposure. First point is linked to our pricing strategy. So we tackle this point differently on the mini-grid market and on the SHS market, because mini-grid being a regulated assets, we are dependent on approval of our tariff. We have a very concrete example in Zambia where we've seen the kwacha depreciated between 2019 and 2021 by more than 50–60%. It has impacted a lot our sales, but what we've done is we've negotiated with the government a multi-year tariff increase to take into consideration, to integrate basically the depreciation of the currency. In Uganda now, we have also a very good example where we've negotiated our tariff on a dollar basis. Obviously, our customers are paying tariff per kilowatt hour in Ugandan shilling, but each time we've seen an important depreciation of the Ugandan shilling, we are able to readjust our tariff based on this approval that has been agreed on a dollar basis. That's for the mini-grid part. On the SHS, by definition, SHS, we are supposed to be less exposed to FOREX risks because it's a commercial cycle of 3 years. We are granted our customer for 2 to 3 years loans, while when we talk about mini-grid assets, obviously it's more long-term horizon. We talk about 20 years. So, but still, we have an internal strategy in order to anticipate any depreciation and to take that into consideration in the pricing. So in our pricing catalog, we have a forward assumption of 3 years of the depreciation of the currencies that we integrate already a priori in the pricing that we propose to our customers. And on the SHS also, it's important to notice that basically SHS developers, they have like a huge value of trade receivables, because by definitions we are selling on a pay-as-you-go model, so we are increasing huge bunch of trade receivables that is highly exposed to an FX depreciation. Our portfolio of receivable will be impacted impacted by decrease depreciation of the currency. But in our case, as we are still expanding our market, so the increase in our sales offset somehow or compensate the depreciation of the currency. So As of now, it's more or less managed. Obviously, other strategy that we include within NG Energy Access is cash management. So it's like very operational things that I wanted to talk about, but this is also the voice of the developer. Cash management is important. So we try as far as possible to not keep a huge amount of cash in the country where we are facing important depreciation of the currency. So either we reimburse intra-group shareholder loans with this cash value in order to do not keep the cash locally or paying management fees, for instance. And we convert systematically all our revenues that are received obviously in mobile money accounts into our domestic USD accounts. So we do not keep local currency, and we convert it. And last point is debt. I mean, this is the most obvious, and this is also why I wanted to end with that one. Local currency debt. And we've signed 2 important loans that in which we can draw in local currency that have been signed with EIB. One in Benin of 10 million, and we are able to draw that facility in francs CFA, and another one which is in Uganda. So that's obviously the best hedging strategy, because the cash from the sales will be used to reimburse this facility.
Thank you, Maury. Very interesting that you're mentioning those 3 different instruments a developer can rely on to reduce the exposure to FOREX risks. One question to make it a little bit more concrete, maybe for the audience: are you willing to share maybe some successes or fails in implementing those instruments in your projects?
Fails, yeah, I think that raising local currency debt for us is, as of now, apart the 2 examples that I've discussed, is kind of a fail, because it's very complicated to get access to domestic financing because of the risk our market is exposed to. The domestic banks are not willing to take those risks yet, and mini-grid, if we talk about mini-grid being like infrastructure project, we need long-term debt. And if you look at long-term debt in domestic value, it's just very complicated or very expensive. And also the hedging is something that's it's complicated because of the cost behind. So sometimes it's almost like preferable to have like the local currency facility instead of putting in place this hedging. But what we do well is like diversification. We are not exposed to only one currency, but like very diversified portfolio, which by definition compensate on a portfolio basis the risk we are exposed in terms of currencies. So I think that's also something to be noticed, yeah.
So diversification also as a way to build on resilience for your activities. That's interesting. I think that there will be a question, obviously, regarding how the local governments and the local institutions can, create incentives or, enter the game to make it easier for both developers and banks and investment funds to partner and to create those risk-sharing models. So welcome to that. But now I want to ask Folabi, I'm turning to you. You are involved in Nigeria. Can you tell us how Olan contributes to unlock funding and especially domestic capital? And what did you learn? What is necessary to set up? And what risk or barrier do you see? What is your return on experience?
Okay. As you know, Olan is an impact investment company, Energy Access Nigeria, focused about 50 companies in our portfolio, totally. We've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like I always tell people, my portfolio is either very, very good or very, very bad. There's very little in between. And that's because only the companies which are able to pivot, to manage, to iterate quickly in these markets are really the companies that can survive. And of course, the biggest challenge which we see in this space is really that of managing the FOREX risk, because there are a lot of tactics, approaches, systems which companies can put in place to help them manage. It also depends on the business model which you have. If you are a mini-grid company, like of course we've got about 13 mini-grid companies, from those that have one mini-grid to those that have about 20, 30 mini-grids within our portfolio. So we see all those issues. If you are a mini-grid company, like Marine has mentioned, it's a bit more difficult for you to to pivot or to manage because it's a regulated industry. You can't pick up that mini grid and go somewhere else. You more or less have to manage with what you have. However, if you are a solar home system distributor, if you have a battery as a service company, you are a lot more nimble. There are a lot more things you can do. There are companies in our portfolio which sometimes look at managing that difference between cash sales and lease-to-own sales. Because if you do, for example, 30% cash sales versus 100% lease-to-own, your PAR and the numbers look very, very different. If you try as much as possible to also reduce how long you can have in terms of lease-to-own periods, from let's say 25 months, 30 months to maybe 12, 18 months, those are some of the levers you can move. Of course, there is then how you then manage the difference between growing at the level you will want to and then operating a portfolio that is healthy. Those are the trade-offs which the companies typically have to manage on a day-to-day basis as they implement these different strategies. There is also, of course, a lot of other things which companies also do. There has been, I think, about 2 companies which have tried this. They basically have taken dollars from entities like Sunfunder, for example, put that dollar in the bank, and then borrowed Naira, the Nigerian currency, from that bank, using that dollars more or less as security, and then generating interest on that dollar so that they can manage the Nigerian issues they have, the procurement, anything they need to buy within the Nigerian market. If they have a way to still procure, they can manage all of that, because for them, sorting out the Nigerian Naira issues is a smaller demon to fight vis-a-vis the Naira losing value against the USD. So those are some of the things which some of these companies do. At the macro level, at all on, we are also clear that we will also need to begin to domesticate as much of the value chain as we need to have in Nigeria. So we've invested in a company called Oxano, which is basically the premier solar panel assembly company in Nigeria. So their panels are typically 15 to 18% cheaper than the panels which are brought in from abroad. We have also invested in solar component assembly companies. So their products are also about 5 to 10% cheaper than what you find coming from abroad. We've also been key drivers, key companies working with capital allocators, working with people who are working to set up local currency funds, because like Monojit has said, there are a lot of capital allocators, especially pension funds, who are sitting on billions of dollars in local currency, who are looking for investment that can give them a utility rate of return, which is at least infrastructure-like. And things like mini grids, SHS, if done right, if done in the right way, actually have this profile that can provide them with this kind of rates of return. So we're working with entities to set up some of this kind of fund. We can look at this space, attract these pools of capital, which can then be used to support companies in this space. So there are quite a number of things which have been done, but of course, the most important thing is going to be, there's got to be a level of macroeconomic stability, no matter how you play it. Once you can find that, once somebody coming to Nigeria knows that 2-3% depreciation year on year, you can manage that. It's a smaller hurdle rate for you to manage, versus if the currency is losing 25, 30, 35% a year. So I think that's the first thing we need to do. Of course, there's also something else which you can do. There are also companies which are diversified. So I would rather, for example, sometimes if I look at the structure, I don't think the Nigerian company still has a few years to go. I would rather say I will invest in your holdco, which also has interest in other countries. And sometimes I even like companies, for example, which have exposure to the CEFA region, because it's compared with Nigeria, it's a lot less volatile. And say, okay, I will use that, and then use that to at least de-risk what I'm doing in Nigeria. So you really have to look at it on a company by company basis, on a sector by sector basis. And then, of course, there are the micro things which the AFDB is doing at the macro level. But of course, these companies have to survive on a day-to-day basis. And these are some of the things which they continue to do to help them manage the challenges with which they see at the moment. But for us at All On, any local currency fund, any infrastructure fund, any asset core model which can help to pull together these funds, attract pension funds, attract family offices, attract the people that are looking for stable, reliable, who are not looking for no 30%, 50% returns year on year. Those are the kind of people that we're looking to at least be the first LP on those funds, if possible, be the first people to put in 2, 3, 4, 5 billion, and then support all the other people that come on. And of course, we sit on some of those meetings with pension funds saying, yeah, we are ready to put our own money behind this. You guys pony up some money. So that's what we do. Yeah,
thank you, Afolabi. That was really interesting. And okay, I think that there is a topic about local governments and obviously local banks and how this whole thing can work together. I'd like to have your point of view, Mary, Monajit, and Chris, on that. Mary, maybe just to start with you as a developer. Okay, this is a stage, and I think that we should use this as a stage to also, throw out messages to the audience and to the crowd. I know there are some country representatives in the audience. What would be your message to local governments and maybe local banks representative or any international institution, but maybe governments, just focus on that. What do you need to move forward? What do you need to implement the instruments that you were talking about, and especially the local currency instruments?
Yeah, we need...
Feel free.
Sorry?
Feel free.
Yeah. I think what is needed is maybe more support from DFIs on the training to the domestic banks on what is our risk, assessing our risk, to provide technical assistance that is used, because we've seen a lot of technical assistance. Everybody is talking about that, but we need to use these envelopes for something very concrete and to have this kind of support toward the banks in order, and also additional concessional financing like banking intermediation between the DFIs and the commercial banks, domestic commercial banks, in order to increase the tenors, having long-term local currency, and increase also the nominal, so having more liquidity could be very, this is something that we need as developer. We need to decrease the cost of the funding. As of today, basically, we can't afford the level of rates that are proposed by the domestic commercial banks. And I think the role of the DFIs doing banking intermediation could support a lot our sector.
Yeah, thank you. As a private developer myself, I couldn't agree more, so thank you. But from your perspective, Monajit and Chris, do you agree with Mary's statement? Do you have another opinion? Can you add something?
No, I do agree that there's a role to play for DFIs or maybe funds like ourselves. I heard Monajit say earlier that he thought that it would be good that commercial banks take a risk, and I must agree with that. That would be great, but being the devil's advocate here, and having worked for a commercial bank, not in an emerging market, but in Europe, I know how commercial banks think, and they think we have savings from our clients, and we have to be extra careful, so we won't do anything that we might be, that we're not familiar with, or because in the end it's our savers that trust us with their money, and we can't just give that away. So that's how they think, and I think it's probably needed by people that know the markets and that know what they're doing, and that also trust that are more familiar with it to take the initial risk, get to commercial banks buy into it slowly because they just need more time. So that's I agree, it would be great if they're taking risk. I just don't think we should go too quickly with that because it just won't work.
Thank you. So I think we agree completely with the points, and Marie said technical assistance has to be concrete, and exactly, I think we need to sort of focus on the key blocks and sort of address those and sort of see that it's sustainable beyond just sort of saying, okay, we run one training tick box and business as usual for the bank after that. And I think the issue in many countries actually with banks often is the fact that you can invest in government treasuries without thinking, and the cost of going through difficult analysis, that is a problem. So that's one thing. But I think in terms of tenors, etc., I think this is where DFIs can come in with sort of guarantees to try and extend the tenor. So if the banks are, comfortable for 7 years, but you need 10, we could come in to cover that. So that's definitely solutions that are available and that we'd be sort of, when I say we, I think that most DFIs are looking at and bringing down the cost of financing. And this is why we're trying to blend. Most of the banks are operating, the DFIs are operating with still on the private sector side through a commercial sort of approach. And this is why blending finance is important, because that allows us to sort of bring down the cost of funds or the cost of the guarantees, as the case may be, and that sort of feeds into sort of the project economics a little bit. So yeah. Anything else? Chris, absolutely. I think you're right. I mean, so people who are not sort of willing to take the risk, I think if they come in sort of on behind, I mean, it's almost a treasury operation for whoever is doing it, right? So you're sort of arranging the local currency through them, they have no exposure, but through that experience, they come closer. I mean, I think, I think point taken, I think for people who are extremely risk averse, but so far we've actually seen, I mean, I think, again, very anecdotal evidence, but I think we are seeing people willing to take some degree of exposure, so we want to try and encourage that to the extent possible, and I think encouraging that means sort of engaging in discussions on the technical assistance, looking at how national entities can come in, pension funds can come in. Often with pension funds, I think this is not a problem for DRE, but for infrastructure in general, there may be allocations for infrastructure, but you'll find that a fraction of that is utilized because trustees are reticent, do not know. So one of the things the banks does in terms of local capital market development is sort of try and sort of push these things, which is not linked to DRE, but at a wider level.
Thank you. Mary, you wanted to add
maybe to add something and to complement. We've heard what we need, but I would like to add the fact that what we don't have is time. And obviously, these actors need time to catch up, etc. But what we don't have is time. And spending more than a year to raise financing on a very technical and detailed due diligence, I think it's not sustainable. Going through many processes of credit risk approval in order to assess every single line of our project, and I think this is not sustainable. So what we don't have is time, and what we see everywhere that there is a lot of programs from a lot of partners that are not obviously spent, and because of, I think, complexity of the due diligence. I think that's to be.
And to also lay on top of what she said, I think it's also important to also talk about the issue of scale. We've got too many, what my former boss used to call Bunting Bonner mini-grid companies up and down. We need to have scale, because really a lot of these transactions do not make sense after a certain scale. No pension funds will not look at transactions which are not of a certain level. No, AFDB is huge. Even them doing a $20 million is like a waste of time, but they'll just do it because they've got love for the ecosystem. So I think we need to also start looking. If a company operating one mini-grid company, then find a way to then become one operating 50 mini-grid companies. I wish them all the best. But I think we also have to start looking at who are the companies who are deploying, who are making impact, what support do we need to give to these companies on an integrated basis. Not just AFDB alone, not just GIZ alone. Everybody, what are the 3, 4, 5 problems of these companies? FOREX, this, that, market, importation for Nigeria, for example, is a major issue. You can pay $20 for bringing in a container today. You bring in the same container 2 weeks, 3 months time, you pay $40. How can you plan? How can you run a business on that? What are the core issues? Then how do we solve those issues for, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 companies? And those 15 companies, of course, you also have to manage antitrust or what have you, but you have to find a way, because really the current situation which we have, where you have 300 companies jumping up and down, it really doesn't help scale, doesn't solve it for anybody. What we do at Honor, we support everybody, but it's clear to us that if I'm going to deploy $10 million, I'd rather have 7, 8 million to 3 companies than distribute 10 million to 20 companies.
I completely agree. I think that's solutions might be available, but most solutions are only available if you raise bigger ticket sizes. So aggregation of smaller projects and especially for smaller developers is key, because then that opens different kind of markets with different solutions as well.
Yeah, but that means probably that we need to work not only on the financial instruments and the structure. We have developers here and banking and funding institutions. We don't have governments representative here. Probably this is something that we need to add to the conversation to make sure that it's all aligned, because scaling up, framing and risk sharing and moving forward and faster, this requires the support and the effort of all the stakeholders. So, but I don't know if maybe there are some governments representative who want to engage in the discussion. I'd like to invite the audience, you guys, to come in with questions, remarks, or brilliant ideas. Do not forget that this is not just a question and answer session, but that can also be the stage for the awesome ideas for the future. So, is there any? Yes, I see a hand. Yeah, right there, like the auction. I see the guy over there on the right side. Do we have a mic? One time, 2 times. Yeah, your left, my right. Yes. Can you raise your hand, sir? And please, can you just state your name, the organization you're working with, and the person you're addressing the question to?
Okay, thank you. My name is Demetrius Jonas. I'm from Namibia, Ministry of Mines. So, we do have, I'm from...
Can you please keep the mic very close to your mouth so that we can hear, because we can't hear?
Yes, okay. Now, I'm one of the government representatives. So it appears nobody wants risk. The bank doesn't want risk. Government definitely also doesn't want risk. And then now developer is just in between. My observation is that, developers, okay, government doesn't really go into negotiation with lenders. So the developer do this because they want money, of course. But I think the earlier speakers spoke about breaking the silos. I think for all of us to de-risk this project, somewhere we need to come together. Lenders must also come out and say, okay, this is what, from the government side, these are the type of decisions that if government do take these decisions, they might affect, like Mary spoke about depreciation, they might result into depreciation. But I think from my observation, that is not really happening. So banks are trying to protect themselves. Government obviously is also trying to protect itself by not being exposed. But at the end of the day, I think somewhere in between, developers get affected, and you can see that it appears that I think there is that need for all of us to apportion this risk. I think that's just the comment I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone want to comment on breaking silos and trying to find a way to make this work if nobody wants to take any risks?
Really, I think I support what he said, and I think the key thing is going to be there's got to be integrated thinking. I have a background in oil and gas, and that's always what we talk about, integrating upstream, midstream, downstream, all that stuff. There needs to be systems thinking in terms of this ecosystem. And the government in the countries have to decide, is this strategic? Where is the zeitgeist going to? How do we support this ecosystem? Tax credits, whatever it is, and such that whatever solution, because really at the end of the day, each of the companies operating here, even the investors, are really, apart from EFDP, who is macro, are really just surviving on a day-to-day, quarter-to-quarter basis. We need to sit down and say, what do we need to do as a country and bring everybody together? We've had that, I think, for some time to a reasonable level of success in Nigeria, where you had the Rural Electrification Agency actually drive the off-grid agenda within Nigeria, and we saw a lot of progress being done in that regard. So we need to have that integrative thinking, not just companies surviving on their own, having tactics and not strategies. You need to have somebody who basically says, how many connections do I need in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? What capacity of companies do I need to grow in this sector to get to that point? What will those companies need? And as you answer those questions, the roles of Sunfunder, AFDB, Angie, all on, everybody begins to become clear and apparent. Where you have clashes in interest or what have you, this entity can sort those out. Where possible, maybe by fiat, although that doesn't solve much, but even if it means reducing interest rates or doing a waiver for the sector or doing anything at all such that projects become easier to do. So I think unless there's integrated thinking at the macro level, companies will just continue to just try to survive on their own.
So locking people in the same room and closing the doors and waiting for them to solve the problem. And if they don't, then game over. Before taking another question, does anyone else have a comment on that, or should we move on to the next question? Okay, there's a sir on the front row. Can you raise your hand? Sir? No, you don't? Okay. Can you raise your hand if you have a question? Yes, there's a lady over there. Can you stand up, please? Perfect. Sir, with the she's standing. She's standing up. Blue top. Yes. Perfect.
Hello, everyone. I'm not from the government. My name is Rakik Bakala from Green Synergy PLC, a private company in Ethiopia. So just to say a little bit about the local, FOREX problem in Ethiopia and how the government supported us previously, and we're expecting that to happen probably soon again, was through the World Bank there was a financing loan to the government of Ethiopia, which was given to Development Bank of Ethiopia, which is a government bank. And then the bank gave us a FOREX loan, which we used it and then paid it back in local currency, in birr. So that was really very successful. It went very, very slow because of just the normal bureaucracies that the government bank had. But in the end, all the local players paid back the loan in local currency, and which was successful. And they want to do it again in the next quarter. But still, it has its own challenge and slow, and now they want to do it through commercial banks, learning from the previous way of doing it. So this is just to share with you guys. But then I have a question maybe for FDB or some funders. I always participate in this kind of events, and I hear from the World Bank, FDB, and there is, financing instruments, energy transition, just energy transition, and lots of all these exciting words. But I really find it really hard how you can get reach to the local companies, because as a local company, I have been looking for financing since 2019, just before COVID, and until now we are not able to secure proper financing. What we get is just small amount of grants here and there, which really takes our focus from it helps, but it doesn't really scale for us. And the financing usually is for international companies like probably ENGIE or Deloitte and so on. So how are you guys coming into Ethiopia? I'm specifically mentioning Ethiopia because it's a specific market. It has its own different challenge, and it needs customized and innovative financing instrumentations. And how are you reaching us? That's my question. And if you're coming, we have 65 million people in off-grid, which is one of the largest African off-grid market, which I would say no investor, impact investor or equity investor is coming into. And why is it taking so long, and why is it hard to make a customized solution? Yeah.
Let me first propose to maybe meet after this session and chat, because let's see what we can do. But besides that, I think you're right. It's we need to reach out specifically to local, and I want to say female entrepreneurs in particular, to see how we can support them and get a more gender balanced field as well. On Ethiopia, obviously there is a lot of things that I can say. I'll also leave a little bit to Monojit. I think one of the issues might be that you're looking for smaller ticket sizes. And again, almost the larger you want to raise, the easier it becomes. But I'm very happy to kind of go into details after the meeting and after the session and see what there is that we can do. And I know the LEAF project, I think, is also in Ethiopia, so I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thank you, Chris. No, thank you for that question and sort of raising the point about the large market, underserved market in Ethiopia. I think things may have sort of been impacted a little bit by COVID, but the bank was actually working with the Ethiopian authorities to put in place a line focused on sort of on distributed renewables just when COVID hit, and it sort of put that on hold for a while. We are also, I think, I mean, I had colleagues who were in Ethiopia recently to sort of look at the market again, and I think happy to have a discussion with you specifically on what constraints you're facing separately outside as soon as the session's over as well. But absolutely, point taken.
Thank you so much. Is there any other questions in the audience? Yes. Okay, we'll maybe take 2 questions. We basically have like 10 more minutes before the session ends. So can you raise your hand so I can see them? Okay, there's someone over there. Second row, raise your hand very high. Yes, thank you, ma'am, for the mic.
Thank you. My name is Obin Agu. Marie raised an important issue that hasn't been addressed. The issue of due diligence that will take you like 2 months or 3 months, you've not finished it. So I want the investors to look at that. Some of us, like in Nigeria, we passed due diligence of the World Bank with NEP, Nigeria Fusion Project, and they signed grant agreement with us. So, and if we want to access funding for those grant projects, we are subjected to very strenuous due diligence. In 3 months, 4 months, it's not concluded. It's not helping us. That's one. 2, when we are de-risking, if we use a commercial bank, for example, in Nigeria, whenever government raises interest rate, it goes up. You may start assessing the loan. By the time you finish, that interest rate must have changed 2 times. So you'll be at a very big problem trying to pay back, especially if you're buying through a parallel exchange rate. So one issue, the fund provider should see how to work with central bank of countries, participating countries, to see if this loan can come in hard currency, and then when paying back, pay with the official exchange rate. This will help. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any comment from our panelists? This is not an easy question or remark, but still.
Well,
thank you.
Maybe I can start on that. Thank you, Mr. Obina. I appreciate the feedback. I think it's also dependent on the risk appetite, more or less, of the creditor, which you are looking at. If it which is also, for example, where the issue of scale, which we've also mentioned. It's easier when you have a company that has a full staff whose job is to handle, or a full team whose job is to handle this with a lawyer, and they're looking at a $50 million, $20 million transaction, as opposed to when you, as the CEO, have to do every single thing and chase and respond to every single DD issue. But yes, that is where we are, and that is what needs to be done to support companies. But I think really what can also be done can also be, especially for companies operating at this space, to also see what has been learned. And if you also need to have, for example, a clarity session, or somebody that can actually sit down with you and say, okay, what if you raise money, if you were unable to raise money from XYZ entity at this time. Why couldn't you raise that money? What were the issues which you didn't do? So that you can then take that back and then use that to improve your own process and then make it a lot easier and faster. So it's like, for example, people keep asking, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Why are the same companies raising money, Series A, Series B, Series C, raising money from everybody? You know, some funder is begging to give them money. It's because they know how to tell their story. You know, and unfortunately, a lot of people, even though they know how to build mini grids as an investor in this space, a lot of people don't know how to tell their story. A lot of companies need to know how to tell their story. What does an investor want? You may have all of those details in your head. You may have it somewhere within the mix of like 300 pages of documentation you've had, but you've not integrated them together. You've not put them together in a way that makes this kind of sense which an investor needs to see. So I think as much as possible as we go about this, we need to take what are the lessons. And I think I spent quite a bit of time. I've seen about 5-6 companies I didn't give money to, you know, 4 or 5 years before. And 3 years after, based on me telling them, this is why I didn't give you money. Go and improve this, go and improve this, go and improve this. I know this lawyer, it will help you for free. I know this grant, they will help you for free. And 3 years later, they are back. And they can get money. So I think there's a lot of money, there's a lot of help in the ecosystem, especially in Nigeria. But I think we also need to do what we can. Take feedback from people. This is why I didn't get this. What were the most difficult points for you? Take those feedback and work to correct those. And 80% of the time, correcting those feedbacks will not cost you money. 80% of the time, they won't cost you money.
Yeah, and maybe your other, the due diligence that we all have to go through, which is a necessary evil, and I agree, sometimes it takes very long. I think it depends a little bit per institution how much time it takes. That is just what's needed to do, and the quicker companies respond with requirements, because these requirements come from somewhere. It comes from investors that want to make sure that their money is invested in a proper place. So there are certain hoops you just need to just jump through. First advice is to find an investor that has a process that is quick enough and that's responsive, and that when you call them they answer quickly, then you can see how responsive they are. But it is something they need to see who you are and what your company does. So unfortunately, there is not a lot we can change about it, besides then the fact that it should go smoothly.
Okay, and I was just going to say, and I think this comes back to points on scale, and I think, so let's say in Nigeria, I think if it's a small project, you're much, I think, still better off dealing with people who are focused locally, have a presence. So Afolabi, I mean, Olon, you know, sees many more investments than the African Development Bank sees in Nigeria, from being far away, of course, as an office, but you're far more focused in the space, and hence the volume of activity that you're seeing is much more. So I think your approach to due diligence, I mean, we will need to check many more things, but you've been seeing this, you know, seeing things, you know what to watch for. So it may be quicker if you look at it versus us looking at it, leaving the question of what, you know, fit. So that's one thing I just wanted to say in terms of making things quicker.
Yeah, and in terms of due diligence, I would like just also to add something that having more sustainable KPI in the banking sector would help our market. And this is never assessed when you go through a diligence. Well, it depends. I would not say never, but at least the one we've been through. You know, how many people are impacted? What's, you know, for instance, how many schools you're gonna electrify, and etc. I think this should be taken more into consideration in the sustainability of your project, rather than what will be your project IRR. And I think this, you know, having more even gender equality, KPIs more taken at the very early stage of the assessment.
Yeah, maybe this leads also to how to consider the profitability of a project. I mean, we're only talking about financial return, but we're not talking about at all about social or environmental return as well. I mean, we should not forget that we're actually trying to achieve SDGs and very ambitious goals to provide reliable energy sources to more than 500 million people only in Africa, and that this cannot be done just by having a look at the IRRs, as it was just mentioned. Time is running fast, and maybe some other people have questions in the audience, but I invite you to come and meet the panelists at the end of the... Yeah, I know, but we're running out of time, and I'd like to just give the panelists maybe 30 seconds each to pass the last message before we hand over, drop the mic, as we were talking about. So please, if you have any additional questions, come and meet us after the session. Chris, I'll start with you since you're on my left side. Do you have like a very quick word to end the session?
Yeah, the discussion was a bit wider, but I'll stick to the foreign currency risk. I think it's just a puzzle that we all need to make together. I like the fact that somebody said that silos need to be broken through. I think there is a solution out there, and it just needs to be tried and tested, and once we have it, hopefully it will become available not only for the big ticket sizes but also for smaller ticket sizes.
So yes, like Chris said, I think it's a puzzle that we all need to work on, and the puzzle can sort of have slightly different contours in different cases. So in Ethiopia, maybe sort of access to dollar currency, hard currency is important, and there's sort of a constraint there. So the solution needs to be a little different. Governments could be stepping in through government agencies, taking part, participating in part of the risk. So I think, and this is what the job of the bank is, to sort of work with both stakeholders, developers, and the government to try and sort of put in place solutions. And I think for the over the next couple of years, I think we foresee significant emphasis on key markets: Nigeria, Ethiopia, Ghana, Guinea, Kenya, where hopefully we are able to make a dent in the sort of access rates going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And on our side, maybe following these panels, and basically part of our strategy is to look at consolidated, not looking at financing of single asset or single country, but having this global approach, and which makes sense in terms of diversification of risk in our portfolio, reducing our forex exposure. And I think it's a great approach to raise funding at global level and aggregating our portfolio.
Okay, I think my colleagues have spoken about macro, big companies. Engie is a big company. If you are an operator, a developer in a small company, you're just making 200K a year in revenues max. What you need to do is basically clarify your thinking. You need to understand, who am I? What do I not have? What is holding me back from getting to the next level as a company? There is a lot of technical support in this ecosystem. Find it, use them, sweat them. In Nigeria, we have the All-On Hub. We provide well over 500K directly, non-financial support, in addition to deploying $5-10 million a year to companies in this ecosystem. To the lady in Ethiopia, find these entities that can provide you with the support. If it's to build a model, if it's to support how to present, how to do a pitch deck, how to fund your MVP, your pilot, whatever it is you need to get to, so that you can then become a company that can then sit on this kind of table in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years' time and start thinking macro. You have to survive in the short term, and between you and I, my view generally is there's nobody coming to save you. You've got to look for the infrastructure. You've got to tap into what is available and then use that to grow yourself out of where you are. So that's just my own out there, and it's possible. I've seen females do it. I've seen what's the politically correct word now? Disabled, unabled, well-abled. I've seen all sorts of people without education build companies. You can do it. You can raise it. You can develop those companies. So I think that's just my own out there. It happened in Nigeria. It can happen in Kenya, in Ethiopia, everywhere. Just reach out and get that support. Thank you.
And now we drop the mic. Okay. Thank you for this very positive last word. I think that I have nothing else to add. I'd like to thank you very much for your interventions, your input, your brilliant idea. Thank you, the audience. Thank you guys for staying up and awake for this session. And if you'd like to meet the panelists and chit-chat with us, please come. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, dear panelists. You're excused. And thank you for these direct words of advice, I think, to the audience. I would just like to add, you are not alone. Organizations like ARE are also there to help you and guide you to actually find these technical assistance programs and the investment tools. So we don't do that, but we are the bridge, or we can be a bridge to get to that result. So as a next step, we have a, I think, well-deserved coffee break and exhibition visit planned for now until 4:15. Donc on a la pause café maintenant et visite de l'expo qui est juste de l'autre côté de l'entrée jusqu'à 4h15. Après cela, on aura la session de pitching sur les fonds et les opportunités de financement, notamment pour concrètes pour les différents acteurs ici présents. So at 4:15, we will come back to this room with a pitching session on available funds and financing instruments. And in the next room, there is the Desert to Power Initiative session from the FDB. Thank you, and have a good coffee. Come back at 4:15.